WFUZ-TV, Coastal Alabama, Northwest Florida, the People's Voice.
Hello, welcome to WFUZ-TV. I'm Blair Castro, and I'm here with Thomas Jenkins, and today we're talking to Eric Johansen. Eric is a parent advocate who's here to share his experience going through the Baldwin County court system, has experience with specific judges, guardian ad litem, and DHR. Eric, would you tell us a little bit about your journey and some of the challenges you've faced and everything that you've gone through specifically with your case?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys. It's good to be out there and telling my story to a wider audience. So my story basically started about 2 years ago when I gained access to my daughter's cell phone and discovered that there was inappropriate behavior going on between her, who was 13 at the time, and an 11-year-old boy. And these things were happening while under the custody and control of my ex-wife, as well as the boy's mother. So my first response was to contact local law enforcement in the jurisdiction that these things happened. And in that case, it was Daphne, Alabama. And they put a sexual crime detective on the case. He was on this case for about 6 months. The goal was to try to find criminal negligence, but that never happened. He initiated DHR, so DHR got involved and opened an investigation, did forensic interviews on both children. Both children admitted to this behavior. It occurred over a 5-month period. So DHR continued to do its investigation. The detective was doing his investigation. Nothing was coming of it. And I ultimately decided to file an emergency motion with the court to see if I could get something happening there. Just to kind of back up a little bit with DHR, at no point did this organization show any kind of competence. I ended up having probably 8 different people contact me through the course of their 60-plus day investigation. There was a supervisor. At one point, this supervisor being on the case, things started to look up like there was going to be something, some kind of competence happening. But then she suddenly just quit. Nobody informed me. And so it was just this constant feeling of like these agencies that are, kind of in my mind, I thought were designed to protect children, were just really doing nothing. And the incompetence was palpable. So
can I ask, what was the thing that triggered DHR from the law enforcement side? What process do they get to where they go, okay, we're going to bring DHR into this case?
So nobody told me that DHR was being called into it. What happened was that the father of the boy also made his own report, and that police officer told him he was going to have to contact DHR. So I don't know if it was that police officer or the detective that was working, and specifically in my case, that initiated that. I just knew that one day DHR was calling me.
So it's essentially up to the sheriff's office discretion if they want to call DHR or not?
I think when they hear certain things, it's almost like a trigger. They have to call DHR, is my understanding. But yeah, DHR started out by the first phone call I had with them. They talked to me like I was the abuser, and couldn't keep my name straight, and couldn't keep any of the details straight. I had to keep correcting them. That's when I escalated it to a supervisor, because I just wasn't going to talk to the person that was reaching out to me. And anyway, it got a little better, then it just got worse. And so like I said, the kids had forensic interviews. They both admitted to the nature of the behaviors that they were doing with each other. As a father, there's nothing that prepares a father for the things that I saw on my daughter's cell phone. I mean, we're talking everything from the kinds of words that they were using, to the images they were sharing between each other, to the videos they were sharing between each other. It was the kind of thing that just there were times I just wanted to throw up. It was just unbelievable. There's nothing that prepares you. But despite all that, the overriding theme of my entire experience with DHR and family court and the guardian ad litem and don't fault police officers so much, simply because according to them, they couldn't find a crime. They couldn't establish criminal negligence on the mother's part. And so there was nothing they could do. But it's just, my entire experience to this day has had a theme of all of these agencies and court officers and everything that are supposed to, designed to protect our children. There was a very nonchalant, kind of like, we don't care type of thing. My judge would never even hear any of my evidence. Even when standing in front of them with an attorney and the attorney detailing the nature of the events, he just, and offering to show him things just to make it kind of more tangible, Judge Scully would never even look at evidence. And ultimately, I had this attorney who was great until he wasn't great. And something happened and he just really went missing on me. And ultimately I had to fire him shortly before our trial. And even though I filed all the correct motions and paperwork at the court to do that and asked for a continuance so I could hire a new counsel, all of that was denied by Judge Scully, even though at one point he had initiated his own continuance, and my ex showed up to one of our trial dates, which was supposed to be our main trial date, after 7 months of being able to prepare and represent herself as pro se, which means to self-represent. Despite all that, she basically broke down in tears and was granted a 3-month continuance to get counsel. And I was there with my attorney. I was fully prepared to present the case. And so we just had to wait. And so when my attorney fell apart on me and I asked for a continuance, it was not granted. And Judge Scully forced me to represent myself, which I did not. And then he promptly dismissed my case for what he said was lack of prosecution. And so that's really how my whole situation ended. And I walked out of court and I realized that my thought from almost a year prior to go public, because I just realized nobody was caring, that was what I was going to do. And that's part why I'm here today. I've been going public on Facebook and other avenues for several months now. And it's very interesting because a lot of parents are just stepping up and they're empowered by the fact that somebody is speaking up. I'm not the only one that's speaking up, but it's empowering. Like, parents are coming out of the woodwork saying, thanking me for what I'm doing. I get calls at all times of the day, all kinds of text messages, things like that. And there's so many parents that have been disserved by this system of, agencies that are supposed to really protect children. There's no recourse for me. So that's why I'm here.
That's what's taken us by surprise, is how many people have come out of the woodworks to just tell us about everything that they've dealt with DHR, everything from retaliatory actions from people that worked for them to just,
right.
Parents like Jerry Thewson, being separated from their daughter and facing, a doctor that evaluates them as not psychologically fit to parent.
Yeah.
And it's just been really eye-opening, all those people coming to us to share those stories, and yours included.
Yeah, the corruption, once you kind of step behind the veil, so to speak, and you start hearing these parents' stories, the corruption is, you realize how deep and wide it is. And, that's maybe for a different story as far as my thoughts on that. But it's just, I think, well, a couple of thoughts. Had I allowed a 13-year-old and an 11-year-old to have the kind of activities that they had, I am certain I would be in jail. And I am certain that I would be in front of the judge in a very short order, and that an emergency motion would have been heeded. And it's just frustrating how it almost seems like there's an agenda or something stacked against men. But what I'm encouraged about is when I look, I'm in quite a few different Facebook groups that are nationwide, and there's a wave, there's change coming. And, it can't come soon enough to help my daughter. But the reason I'm doing what I'm doing is because I want to help prepare parents for what they're going to face if they end up in family court. And there's some basic things that when you do it wrong at the very beginning, it sets a pattern that you may not ever recover from. And DHR is one of those agencies where if you let them into your life, they're going to take everything they can get and spit you out.
What advice would you give parents that are afraid to speak up, afraid to stand against DHR and talk about their experience like you're doing, like Jimmy Fusen's doing?
Yeah, Jimmy and I talk quite a bit, almost every day now, and I really respect what the guy's doing. I think that there's two big reasons why parents are fearful, and the main one, and maybe the most justifiable one, is they have a case before the court, and they don't want to basically torpedo their own case by calling out a judge, or even if they don't call out their judge specifically, but talking about their case, and maybe that gets to the judge. So I get that, and I would even say that's legit. I will say there are some parents that, not that I know of in Baldwin County exactly, but in other parts of the country. By the way, this going public with cases, it's not a unique thing. It's starting to happen across the country. And so just yesterday, I talked to some parents that are going public and they are naming their judge, even though they have a case. And the reason why they're doing that is because they see a big picture, and the only way we're going to, make a change with family court is to shed light. Like I often say, I'm going to do everything I can to get these cockroaches running, because then we can stop on them. And that doesn't mean I'm not advocating violence. Okay, so nobody take that the wrong way. But we need to shed light on this corruption so that, there's a lot of people that will never encounter the family court system, but really love and care for children. And you just got to understand that children are being crushed by this system. Yeah, it's the way I see, DHR, the GAL system, the family court, it's designed to create chaos to push as many kids into foster care as possible. And so that's a topic for another time, but there's a system in place that's against children, and it's driven by money. And that's what a lot of people that have never been near this kind of stuff, they just don't know. But I think that if we're ever going to, preserve our country and the children and the next generation, that kind of thing, we've got to reform family court.
Yeah, we were just talking last night. We can't get any communication from our local governance, from our state governance, to air agreements, to make an issue known, to give ideas that would move the local area forward. We don't feel heard, listened to, and it's certainly not unique around here. How we're baffled by the lack of response and communication from the service that we're supposed to be providing and that we pay taxes for.
Yeah, and I think there's a culture of non-transparency, because that by not being transparent, these agencies can kind of do whatever they want. And so that's how somebody like Jack Carney gets recruited in by DHR, paid into the table, double billing, falsifying reports, all this kind of stuff, because it's not in the light. And so that's my goal, is to drag these people into the light and say, look at this, look at what's happening.
Yeah, that's what Blair was talking about last night when we were doing another podcast, and transparency was one of her biggest problems with what she looked at, right?
Yes, where I'm from in Florida, we have sunshine laws statewide, and that's specifically for that, bringing things into the sunshine, into the light. And I would love to see a statewide sunshine version of that in Alabama. And I've been trying to reach out to Chris Elliott about that, or our senator, and try to get some movement there. But that would make a world of difference. Just the difference between an hour drive here in Pensacola, the things that they are required to give you public records of, to be forthright about, they don't have that same requirement in Alabama. And that's a statewide issue. And I really would like to see that legislation come into effect in the future.
We want to know why you still have to subpoena to get your police report, your narrative from the police department. If you make a sworn statement on an incident, I found that I have to make a subpoena, and when I worked as an officer, I just printed off a report when somebody came by the office, and that was the end of it. And same with Blair. She has that experience in Florida. But here you have to subpoena for it, or you get a redacted piece of paper that doesn't even have dates and times.
Yeah.
That blows my mind.
Yeah.
In addition to getting written transcripts, I think there should be video available, not for the public to consume, but if it's your hearing, you should be entitled to a video of that hearing for your own records.
Yeah.
I don't know why that isn't a thing here.
Well, transparency in family courts has been being reduced methodically. There used to be a time where you could take in your cell phone, and of course, cell phones are recording devices. So they stopped doing that. And then I don't know if they made it a law or a court policy or whatever, but they're now specifically saying you can't have any audio recording devices. So they're literally trying to reduce transparency right now because these judges don't want to answer for their actions. You know, I've talked to multiple people and seen multiple comments about Scully's arrogance in trial and even at hearings and just brushing people off. And, you know, it's, and I watched this in my own cases. You know, I've observed him. There was a time where, you know, prior to the whole COVID thing, I would go into court and just sit and observe how he handled cases so I can learn the court system. Because for a long time I was representing myself, and his indifference toward people is compelling, like in a bad way. It's like, how does this guy as a family judge act so indifferent to everything? And I'm not expecting him to get like emotionally involved with everybody's story, but he just seems like he doesn't care. And I don't know, maybe I have a naive idea of what a judge should be, but I think we deserve better.
We had a similar experience with a judge here, different judge, but it was very similar behavior, I think, in terms of just being rude and crass, insulting even to people in the courtroom and just belittling. And I don't understand the purpose behind that when everyone's there to sort of reach a resolution and get some conflict, you know, settled, but it just sort of upped the tension and upped the conflict and kind of made everybody in the courtroom feel on edge. So the decorum of judges, there's no oversight for that because, like you said, there's no recording devices, there's no anything. They're just in there, and they even speak to the attorneys that way. They speak however they like, and it's I've never seen anything like it.
I think that it's largely theater because in my first case before Scully, it was my initial divorce and custody stuff, and my ex's attorney was also the same man that in pictures on Facebook of Scully's campaign page, he was there in Scully's home. This attorney made no bones about the fact that he was contributing money to Scully's campaign. But then in court, they act like they're adversaries and they yell at each other, and it's all theater. And that's what people have to realize. It's just theater. These family courts are not courts of law. And they're just kind of doing whatever they want. I've experienced it time and time again where every state has a rules of civil procedure, and they're all very similar, but there's differences. But Scully, time and time again, has not upheld his own or the state's rules of civil procedure. It plays out in a very discriminatory way. Whereas if I'm found in contempt because maybe I didn't respond to something in time, such as discovery, I am immediately threatened with jail time and fines if I don't respond. Whereas when I file with contempt against my ex because she failed to respond to discovery, it's typically 30 days. And at 45 days, we filed a motion for contempt. He gave her in fact, the reality is she never responded to it until 2 days before trial. It was something like 60 days out. And he did nothing about it, didn't care. But me, I get threatened with jail and fines. So there's something dramatically wrong. And I just think that, we can't fix it from within. We really have to shed light on it, dismantle it in a way, and rebuild it into something else, something that, there's no reason that a judge in a family court should be the judge and jury. There are states where they have jury trials in divorce and custody things. So I just think even if it's not like a full jury, some kind of greater oversight is needed. Somebody needs to be accountable, and I don't believe family court judges are.
The fact you said it's like theater reminded me of our experience in court because I
felt like we were on an episode of The People's Court, that show with Marilyn Milian as the judge.
Yeah.
It was almost exactly like that. I was like, is this real life? Is this a television show? Because it was so performative and just kind of outrageous to me, the behavior.
It was like a hyperbolic Judge Judy.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was a bit over the top.
Yeah, the nicknames and like the way people were just spoken to. I wasn't a fan.
So one of the things that I experienced is my guardian ad litem, and if just in case anybody watching this doesn't know what that is, it's an attorney assigned to the child in the case, and they're just like any attorney, their client is the child. They're not supposed to, represent either parent or be involved in either parent's case. And so my guardian ad litem, his name is John Gamble. So paperwork came out. I reached out to him almost immediately, set an appointment in his office, went and met with him, paid him the $500 I was required to, talked to him for an hour and 15 minutes. He seemed like a good guy. Seemed like if I had to hand pick a gal, he might be the one, just because he has a long history of things with juveniles and children in general. And he seemed to really understand my case, but again, I understood he wasn't there to represent me or like me or dislike me or whatever. I really believed that he would be representing my daughter. And so he laid out this entire plan. There was going to be 2 home inspections, and he would talk to me a couple of times, and of course he would talk to her and some other details. But that was the last time I ever heard from John Gamble. I called his office. I sent him emails. I never had home inspections, and I never saw him until I showed up at trial, and he went out of his way to give me like a stink eye kind of a thing, and then he went and sat with my ex and her attorney. Completely unethical behavior. He's supposed to be representing my daughter, not me or my ex. So, and Judge Scully watched all this happen. Again, nobody cared about that. So be very careful with your guardian ad litems. Also, it's interesting to note that CASA is an organization that oversees guardian ad litems. Because there's a funding issue. There's guardian ad litems given to children in situations where the parents can't pay for it, that kind of thing, and that got completely defunded. So and this is part of what I'm talking about. There's a wave of change coming, and so this is why I really like, if you're ever going to speak up about your case and it doesn't even matter if it was recent or even if it's several years ago, even if it was 5 years ago, speak up. Be part of the voice that's saying, hey, I was disserved as well.
I wanted to talk a little bit about how you felt you were religiously persecuted by the judge. Could you go into that a little bit?
Yes. Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up. So this happened in my original divorce case, where my ex highlighted basically the differences between like my religious practice and her religious practice. And I don't necessarily need to get all into the detail, but like, for example, I don't go to a local church. And she does. At the time, she was attending a kind of larger, prominent local church. And the Judge Scully made a point of basically smirking at me and saying words that made it sound like I must be crazy. And I'm somehow outside of the realm of normal or something. And I thought, this is really, really interesting. By the way, Scully, I've got this recorded, and maybe we're going to deal with this at some point in the future. But I thought, we're in the United States of America, and my religious views might be different than somebody else's, but I'm not some radical, I'm not some, I'm not, handling snakes and drinking poison, and it's all within the realm of normal, and yet I was still held and spoken to like, you're strange and you might even be dangerous. And that's super, that should concern all of us, that a family judge can do that kind of thing from the bench without any recourse whatsoever.
Yeah.
We've had a lot of people reach out saying that they feel their religion and in turn joined with that, their medical choices have been discriminated against. So, for example, people not wanting to vaccines or don't do traditional medical methods. Is that something you've seen or heard about a lot?
So I experienced that firsthand, and Scully does not like the fact that I am natural health oriented, but for my ex, everything is a pharmaceutical response, and for me, it's really more of a natural response first. It's not that I'm like 100% against prescription drugs. Sometimes there's a place for it, but nonetheless, I was absolutely discriminated against and made to sound like a freak. In fact, he because of my views on health, Judge Scully made a psychological assessment of me from the bench, saying I was unstable and I was obsessive about my daughter's health. And, he's not qualified to make those kind of statements. And, I would say, just for anybody viewing this and not having the greater context, I just want to say I am all about natural health. I'm currently 58 years old. I have no known health issues. I don't take any prescription drugs. Height and weight normal, blood pressure normal. Like when I do have to go to a doctor, they sometimes say things like, who are you? Like I don't make sense to them because of my age and my health profile. So my adherence to natural health, it's not just something I say, it's just something I've been living since I was a kid. So I bring this into every part of my life, and especially my daughter. She's got some unique health challenges. So I feel like I was discriminated against religiously for my medical choices. And again, that shouldn't be the case.
Right. So if people are looking to learn more about what you went through or learn about how they can get involved or how they can speak up themselves if they've gone through something similar, where can they find you online, or where can they find, what's a good place for them to connect?
So I run a Facebook group, and that might be the best place for you to reach me. It's got kind of a longer name, but I wanted to incorporate everything that, to really have a message in the name. So it's called Baldwin County Family Court Reform Project. And you can put that in the notes, but Baldwin County Family Court Reform Project. I think also if you just search my name, Eric Johansen, in any local what's happening in groups, you will find me, or you'll find my group. And feel free to reach out. I get phone calls and texts all throughout the day from people, parents that feel empowered or want to encourage me for what I'm doing, and that's encouraging. But I'm also trying to really help these parents maybe navigate what they're either walking into or experiencing in the moment. So yeah, if you need any help, I'd love to talk to you, and if I can help in some way, I will.
Thank you for coming today and talking to us,
Yeah,
sharing your
thanks,
story.
guys.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
it.